Welcome to the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries, where history meets prophecy. I'm Elder Michael.
And I am Officer Charmaine.
Great. Now, today we have a very, very special presentation. Officer Charmaine, I'm going to turn it over to you to give that introduction, and then we'll come back and spread some more details so that others would have a greater grip on what this matter is all about.
So we're looking at the Dahomey connection.
Yes.
First of all, I just want to welcome everyone once again to History Meets Prophecy. It is so good to be here. It seems like it's been a long while since we were here.
Yes.
But thank you for joining us. And remember that this is an interactive session. We look forward to seeing your comments and your questions. And before we proceed, please don't forget to like this video, to share it, to subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and also to comment. And just a reminder, we do have a form in the description box below. So if you want to join the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries or looking for more information, please complete that form. So we are going to talk about the Woman King. You know, we were going to title it the Woman King, but I think that name is kind of overplayed. So we figure, you know, in order for this video to last a long time, we'd call it the Dahomey Connection. So, yes.
I haven't. Have you seen the movie?
I've seen the movie. Oh my
So you have to be careful what you say then.
Yes. I'm going to try my best not to give away too much.
Right.
I know that, I don't know actually, but I've heard through the media that a lot of people want to boycott this movie. They want to boycott it. A lot of people are very angry about it. Guys, what do you think? Has anyone out there seen The Woman King?
You know, I haven't seen it, and I don't know. I would like to see it from a historical perspective. However, I am turned off by the name. I do not appreciate the name. Look, your friend, Officer Charmaine Elizabeth, ruled in Britain for 1,000 years, and she was called Queen Elizabeth. Yes, she was called Queen Elizabeth. So why now that we have a Black woman, beautiful Black woman, why is she the man king or whatever, the woman king?
The woman king.
I don't know what the hell they
No, you know what? I completely agree. The title is a little bit off-putting. I understand it's Hollywood and they want to make it, you know, have it be attention grabbing. And so the title is there probably to invoke people's emotions. I don't know, but I am a little bit like yourself concerned with the title. I feel like it takes away from a woman, basically. It's saying that being a woman and being a queen is not enough, right? Whereas it is everything. You know, we know great queens that have ruled, you know, kingdoms for years. And I don't see why they don't emphasize the fact that, you know, she's a woman.
I think,
king, you know?
Yeah, I think it's the subject matter is very significant because I don't know if there's any place in history where something like that has occurred before. However, it detracts from this very special presentation in the sense that the movie is speaking to a unique historical precepts. But when you have the woman king,
supposed to.
Yes, exactly.
That's why. Okay.
Yeah. So when you have the woman king, I think of there's a hidden agenda, and I don't like it because if my little 7-year-old daughter, if I had one, came and she said, well, you know, I want to be can I be a king one day? I would have to tell her no.
Yeah.
And that would not be, after seeing the movie, that would not be too pleasing to her. You know, I can say you could be a queen or a princess, but you can't be a king. And then with my son is going to be disappointed because he's going to be like, well, what do I be? Am I going to be a man queen? Like,
no.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Because
That sounds worse than Woman
Well,
King.
that's the point. That's the
Anyway,
point. Behind
it
the
takes away
scene,
from femininity. It does. It takes away from and it also plays into that slave narrative that, it there is a problem. And one of the problems today is that being a Black person or a person of color, we're sometimes looked upon as maybe not having as much feelings as others. Our threshold for pain. You would look at a 15-year-old girl and you would treat her differently from a Caucasian, a 15-year-old Caucasian, because maybe she's smaller, maybe she's not as developed, and
okay,
then
that's a
there's so much
good point.
negative, yeah, but there's so much negative connotation because you're not seeing, the young woman of color as a young woman of color,
Okay, that's very
Mm,
important. You made a very good
mm,
point there, Charmaine. My question then is why? Why
mm,
is all of this disrespect being tossed into our faces? And I
yeah,
think I have an answer. I think
mhm,
that we have been very disobedient as a people to our God. And thus, because we were disobedient and disrespectful, we have been kicked out, as I will prove later, and you too. And we have been disrespected up until this very day. I think
mhm.
it is important that our audience is made aware of this, and not only that, also made aware of how they can correct that problem to restore that respect, to restore that obedience to our Father once again.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely part of the narrative, but also I feel like there's this hidden agenda out there, and I'm
Yes,
not going to get into it today, but
yes.
I feel like that is also part of that hidden agenda. Mind you, when you watch the movie, I'm telling you, the acting is phenomenal. The script is very nice. The storyline is very nice. It's a really nice movie. So all those that are saying boycott the movie, I'm not really into that whole idea of boycotting movies because this is Hollywood first and foremost. Secondly, if you really want to teach people about your history, you need to learn about your history yourself. We need to teach ourselves about our history. We can't have other people teaching us, because when you do have other people teaching us our history, then you get movies like this.
That's
Right?
correct.
So this
That's
is not,
correct.
in my humble opinion, it's not historical. I mean, they've used an actual name. They've used an actual, based it on an actual kingdom which did exist, which we will talk about. But what went on is slightly distorted,
Yes.
and you'll see why.
And
Yes.
it is also very important that our viewers understand and appreciate the fact that Africa was not our origin. That
Mhm.
we came from the land of Israel. We established the ancient city of Jerusalem, and we were kicked out. And Africa was our first destination, or our second. Actually, it was our
One of our many destinations.
exactly, exactly. So all of this, I think, should be made, and of course, we can't give all the details, but we can
Yeah.
give a summation of it, and so the people would have a perspective from which to view the movie and to see and to be critical or analytical, whichever, and to
Yeah.
make sure that they understand the proper context in which the movie was made, even though the makers made some serious mistakes.
Yes, absolutely. So we use this opportunity to explain what
Yes.
Dahomey, the Kingdom of Dahomey, was all about, how it came about, and what actually took place. Because it's actually quite interesting that they chose that particular location out of all the locations along West Africa, even Africa in general. They chose that particular location, and that particular location is packed with history. And for those of you who are just joining us, we are talking about the Kingdom of Dahomey, which is based on the movie today, which is called The Woman King, is actually based on this location. So that's the movie we're referring to.
Yes. actually, too, before we get to Dahomey, I think we should recognize, as I said earlier, uh, and make it clear to our viewers that we had established, our foreparents had already established the kingdom of Israel. And because we were disrespectful to the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, and we were disrespectful, we were disobedient many, 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 many times. He sent prophet after prophet after prophet, both male and female, to teach us, to correct ourselves, and we failed to do that. As a matter of fact, we got worse. And just like a good parent, he had to invoke some form of punishment. And that,
Absolutely.
sorry?
I said absolutely.
Yes. And that punishment was he kicked us out, and he said that we would be enslaved for 400 years. And all of this began when we left Jerusalem. And of course, Africa was one of our destinations at that time. So this is important that we understand. And by the way, you can read the many what should we say, curses in the book of Leviticus chapter 26 and Deuteronomy chapter 28. The cautions that we had, the warnings that we had, and we didn't pay heed to. So these are important to understand. We did not originate anywhere in Africa. We originated Western Asia in the land of Israel. And then we were kicked out, and we went all over Western Africa and all over Northern Africa. And we helped to build up that continent, as a matter of fact.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I mean, some people they believe that Israel was actually part of Africa, but that's another story that we could look into another time.
Yeah.
But the point of the matter is, we were east of Egypt, and the place that we were actually in were first inhabited by the Canaanites.
Yes.
So so the God of Israel, he went and he prepared that place for us, and he told us to go there and to take it, you know. So long story, long history, but this is how we ended up there, and this was our home for hundreds of years, but because of our disobedience, we lost it.
Yes.
And throughout that time, we were also enslaved many, many times, and we were scattered many times, and we left, you know, on our own accord at sometimes, you know, some points throughout history as well. So those are some of the things that we will look at too.
Right. And even before, we could say, you know, there was no Africa until the Romans. It was called the land of Ham. Some of it was called Ethiopia, et cetera, et cetera. But all of this occurred prior to our having a situation where the movie could actually try to illustrate some of what we did. And the other point that I wanted to make before we get into it is that there were different elements involved. We being Semitic, there were Muslims there who were also Semitic. There were Hamites, and then later on came the children from Japheth. So all of this came together in the Western African region. And the result, of course, I think most people understand, was our enslavement in the New Egypt.
Absolutely. So let's begin by looking at this movie. First of all, what is this movie? But before we actually begin, I just want to make sure that everybody remember to put your comments in the chat.
Yes.
And have any questions or concerns. If you've seen the movie, you know, just say, yes, I've seen it, or no, I haven't, or I can't wait to see it, or I'm not going to see it, whatever it is. Put your opinion in the chat. It's always nice to know what people are thinking, and, you know, where they would like to take this. Maybe by the end of this presentation, you'll have a different thought. Who knows? But yes, we don't want to give away too much. What I can say is that this lady, she's an awesome actress. She's one of my favorite, Viola Davis. There were other actresses in this movie as well. They did very well. All the supporting actresses, fantastic. It really is a nice movie, and I really did enjoy it. And I would watch it again if I had a chance. So first of all, this film is about the kingdom of Dahomey. And its warriors. And throughout history, you hear about the Amazon warriors, and they were women warriors, and it was based on these women in this movie. Um, according to this particular scene was taking place at one point in time when the slavers from Portugal were coming in, and these warriors were fighting against the slavers with their king, with their king in command, to stop the slave trade and introduce palm oil instead. This is just the shortest synopsis of the movie. But as I said, historically real, no, this is not historical in that sense. The only thing that they really got right historically is the actual rituals that they would perform, the divination, the voodoo performances, the voodoo rituals that they got right. But everything else.
So isn't that disturbing, though, that we did so much in that region? And again, we helped to establish the kingdom of Ghana, the kingdom of Mali, the kingdom of Sanghe. And why would they focus on this one
Well,
aspect? Nobody.
Mm,
Yes. What happened to Timbuktu? One of the greatest. Sorry.
That's exactly that's one of the points that I'm trying to bring out, because yeah, a great movie.
Yes.
But there are so many real historical events that took place that you can actually make a movie on. And I have some names later on, but I want to bring up one because she is my favorite, one of my favorites in history, and that is Queen Nzinga of Angola. To me, she is the epitome of queen.
Well, can I say something personally? You are too, Officer Charmaine. You are a princess, and I mean this sincerely. And I know I'm not going to give out all the details, but you were part of the royalty of that region as well, and you can't say no to that.
I guess we can't say no. This is where we're coming from, right?
No, I'm talking about you personally.
So kings and queens. Anyways, so as I was saying before, you put me off guard.
I could prove it.
Anyways, so we're looking at other regions. Like I said, there's Queen Nzinga, and to me, she was a very, very, very powerful queen who ran her country, fighting against the Portuguese for over 50 years. She was an amazing woman. It was like, we're going to learn a little bit more about her later on. But basically, people want to boycott this movie, The Woman King, because of the historical inaccuracies. But the fact of the matter is, if that's the case, you might as well boycott Hollywood in general, because at the end of the day, all they tell you is lies. Do you remember the 10 Commandments?
Yes.
You remember the 10 Commandments, the movie with Charlton Heston? Back in the days, we used to watch it every single, it used to come on around Easter time every year. My brothers and I will go. We couldn't wait till, the one little box, and we're all watching this. It was great, but that is just the biggest lie that you can possibly tell. And that was told every single year, to the point whereby I've had conversations with people, and I know that they're referring to this movie when they're speaking to me because of what they're saying. It's like, oh yeah, well, Moses had the blanket wrapped around him. It's like, where did you get that from? You got that from the movie, The 10 Commandments.
Exactly.
That's exactly where they got it from. So, one of the things, or one of the dangers, is looking at a lot of these movies and looking at them as historical facts. It should be a way to prompt you to go and do more research on that area, not take it for gospel. Because the same thing that happened back in the days when we were enslaved, we sat down in those Christian shrines and we listened to the information that we, were being fed us, but we weren't able to. And then we did not. First of all, we weren't able to because we weren't allowed to go and read and research for ourselves. And then when we were able to, we didn't do that. We continued to absorb the lies that they told us. So people believe that, Jesus was born December the 25th, and that, Easter's there, and, hot cross buns. They believe all this stuff is in the book. Somebody came to me once and talking about the Trinity. It's like, what? what are you talking about?
That's perverted.
It's like, oh, what do you think about the Trinity? Where do you find it in the scriptures? First of all, let's start from there. It's got nothing to do with the scriptures, but this is what they think, right? They talk about the Trinity and rapture and all these strange terms, but it's not in the scriptures. It's not scriptural. But that's the problem that we have. So when you watch movies like this, it's not to say that you're watching history. You're watching a movie. If you really want history, go out there and find the history. Go
But
research.
I think the movie should inspire us, whether it's right
Yes,
or wrong, to go and do our own research and get the facts
exactly.
straight, and to see that Israel is the only unique nation on the face of this earth. And when I say Israel, I'm talking about us, about the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries. And
Mhm.
I'm glad that Elder Shadrach took us into his arms and taught us so that we can grow up with a sense of not only analysis but critical analysis, to the point where we could see for ourselves what really happened and to share that with others that may come to search for the truth, because without the truth we're nothing.
Exactly. Exactly. And you mentioned Elder Shadrach, and it's so appropriate to give him thanks because
Yeah.
when you read his books, you're reading about history, you're reading about our history. And this is how I first understood this. This is how I first saw myself in history. I saw myself through the pages of the Bible just by
Yeah.
reading his books. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, it was so incredible. From the first book that was written, The Truth, the Lie in the Bible, right down to the book that you helped to write as well, The
Yeah.
Spirit of Egypt in America. This is where I saw that everything became technicolor, you know. um, I can see myself, I can see my forefathers, I can see clearly because of how it was presented. And it was presented historically as well as biblically. And that to me was just a beautiful combination. It was
It,
so well done. And
it
I
is
really
perfect.
appreciate
It
that.
is
And
perfect because
this is why we continue to do this, because it was so exhilarating, especially for my soul, that I
yes,
just need to continue, bringing that light to other people, to share, as you said, to share with the world,
yes.
what's really out there.
Right.
You
And
know?
I think too that people should have a proper perspective for all of these events. And it's not just the movie, it's the rest of the world, the entire Western world. The context in which we should see it is through Western Africa, because therein is where all the nations of the world came together. And when I say nations, I'm talking about the three combinations: the children of Japhet, the children of Ham, and the children of Shem, coming together to formulate a concept that is going to show the rest of or help develop the rest of the world, to bring things to fruition. We have to know the role that we played in that event. We have to know
Mhm.
why this occurred, and how is it today that we are in a position to maybe we're not benefiting from the role that we played, but how can we correct that? How can we
That
make better use of what is available to us, and not to blame other people, but to take the right steps and do the
mhm.
right things so that others, because right now, as I see it, they're all looking to us for some help. But we
Yeah,
don't understand that. We have to continue to do what was written by our foreparents and walk in that path, that unique path, in order to show the people of the world how they should live, or what option they should take. That's all.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we can go into one of the slides, and I just want to point out just a few of the items which were incorrect. Okay, so first of all, we have the Kingdom of Dahomey. So the Kingdom of Dahomey was a West African kingdom located within present-day Benin, that existed approximately between the 1600s to the 1900s. And Dahomey developed. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so yeah, so this was the kingdom. This is the location where it was. Um, like I said, this is a present day Benin, which is in between Nigeria and Togo today, right? So one of the things that needs to be pointed out is that the southern part of Dahomey was a kingdom called Wider, and we're going to go into more details later on with regards to the name Wider. Even saying it, it sounds very familiar, like Wider. We'll go into all the different terminologies of this name. Anyways, but towards the southern part of the coast was the kingdom of Wider. Apparently, the kingdom of Dahomey, which was a little bit further up, they eventually fought against the kingdom of Wider and assimilated them into their culture or sold them off as slaves. But we'll go into that a little bit more.
And I think it is important to explain also that this whole kingdom is a residue of a civilization that was magnificent in the years previous. So it's a decline because
Right.
back in the day when Western Africa, let's just say, was prosperous and had a kingdom, well, there were several of them that were, there was no such that were magnificent, I should say. There was no such place called Europe back in the day because Europe came from Europa, who was a Phoenician princess, and this happened in the early 1600s. But going back to Ghana, back in the second century or fourth century, it was magnificent. All of this is important that people need to understand. Dahomey is a residue. It is almost like the leftovers. Like you cook a good meal and then you ate well, and then the next day you have leftovers and you just, you put an egg on it and you made scrambled rice or whatever and go with that. So this is important to put it in that context, I believe.
Right. Yes. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there were many civilizations throughout the western coast of Africa that rose to greatness and dwindled away to nothing.
Right.
And it's very sad when you look at how that happened with the Muslims coming in, the Europeans coming in, and everybody just decimating those particular kingdoms, and especially those that Israel set up. And you'll
That's the
see,
point. That's the
especially
main
those
point.
that Israel set up, right?
Yes.
And you look at them, and people will say, "Well, how did you get here?
Yeah.
How did they get here? What do you mean, kingdom of Wider? How is that possible? You're saying that this is the place where Israelites were. Well, this is what we're here to show you."
Yes. That is
Okay.
absolutely correct. Our ancestors, had a hand in the building of those kingdoms and
Mhm.
and bringing to fruition not only prosperity but academics and we had a copy of the Bible there. When I say the
Mhm.
Bible, I'm talking the First Testament, right? And we use that book as a form of inspiration. Now, of course, this was a late entry, but it's better late than never because we were already punished or kicked out. But still, we continued learning and continued doing the things that our forefathers did back in the day when they were in the land of Jerusalem and Israel.
Right, absolutely. And you'll see that all of these places within Western Africa has residue of Israelite customs, Israelite practices. You
Yes.
know, you'll see it, and it's right across the board, and it's really quite interesting. And
And
that
now
just goes
I
to
have a
show that we
question.
were actually in those places.
Was that highlighted in the movie? The Israelite residue?
No, but that's the funny thing. This is the funny thing. That's why I'm bringing this, or we're bringing this title out there, because it seems like today, especially in nowadays, nobody wants to associate the children of slavery in the Americas with the Israelites of old.
Yes.
Why? I don't understand why. But the thing is, there were authors up until, I don't know, 1924, even a little bit further than that. They were actually saying, "Oh, look, the Israelites are black, and Israelites are here, and Israelites are here," and
Right.
most of the time we were
Isn't
told
that
it's Jews.
strange? Isn't
And
that
then all of
strange?
a sudden it stopped. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You have to go back a few hundred years or a few years in order to actually find Israel in these locations.
Yeah,
Israel in Spain, Black Israel in Spain, Black Israel in Portugal,
all
Black
over
Israel
North
in
Africa.
Angola, in yeah, you have to go way back in order to
Yeah.
see this. And
I
there's so
might,
many references.
and I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with the fact that the same people that deny the Israelite component are claiming it for their own, for themselves.
Yeah,
Why?
well, that's the thing. They stopped talking Black Israel. You know, they stopped talking about us as being Black, and now it's about everybody else.
So that is the real meaning then of being
And
anti-Semitic.
it is really disturbing, honestly, really, really disturbing. And I'm like, why do I always have to go back to these old references in order just to see us? You know, why isn't it in modern text? Why isn't it read? Or, you know, and there is so much references. Believe it or not, guys, there is so much references with Israel being Black and in these places.
I think More Gamer has a question. He
Do we
said,
have okay, do we is it question time? Are we going to take a break for question time?
well, we could, but we could answer this one here.
Okay.
He says, in this day and age, with all of the lies aside from the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries, okay, there it is. What other credible sources are available to us to dig up our true history?
See, well, we're going to show you some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I,
there are,
I
yeah,
think it's going to be a challenge. And of course, the Bible is the main standard. But I
yes.
think from a historical perspective solely, you know, you can't, you know, one of the things that I like to talk about is the Negro spirituals, because in
Mm,
Negro spirituals, we sing not only the history, the culture, and the spiritual component as well, but it tells a full story, and it tells it in such a way that it is receptive. And most of the authors today don't have a clue,
yes.
unfortunately,
Well,
unless you get
today,
to
that's what I'm
Shadrach
saying.
books.
Today,
Yeah.
today, people don't. You know, I was actually reading Rudolph Windsor, from Babylon to Timbuktu. And I'm like, I'm reading it, it's like, but there are so many errors in here. It could be a good book, but there's so many errors, you know, and it's so frustrating because, you know, I feel like
Do you know why they're errors?
they're buying into a narrative that they want to believe.
That's right.
Right? So they,
And not only
you know,
that, he had a collaboration with the Khazars.
yeah, yeah. So it's like it really is very sad when you read that. It's like you're so close yet so far. You know, even like Hebrewism in West Africa. It's a great book, but then it goes way off. It's like, why can't you just believe that, you know, the children of Israel are really the children of Israel? It's like you're writing as though you don't really believe what you're writing. It's not credible. So you got to put your own interpretation into it.
And that is why I mentioned the fact that we were disrespectful and disobedient. It's not that I'm proud of it, but I want to show that that led to our punishment, that led to our dispersal, that led to our being in the new Egypt today. Because how is it that everybody claims to be Israel, but only the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries acknowledge our disobedience, acknowledge our enslavement, and acknowledge that we have returned to our Father's house? This is why we are able to understand and appreciate what's in the Bible.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's look at some of the points that the movie did not get right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so C. Barbara Smith says, consider who owns and controls communications when we again worship our own God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. The truth will be told, no doubt. And this is
Yes.
what we're doing. We have to tell this. You know,
Yes.
you're going to find so much interpretation of history out there. And you know what? You're right. The victors are the one that tells the history
Yes.
because they're going to tell it their way. But now we have the opportunity or the ability to tell the real truth of what took place. You know, by reading certain things, that that did not happen the way they say it did. And
Exactly.
one of the things, we're going to look at some of the fabrications that, the movie actually presented, which is nice because it gives us an opportunity to combat that information.
I agree. And, regardless of what happens, they have done the best that they can do. And it may not be to our standard, but that's what we need to recognize. We are way up there. It's the God of Israel, the heavenly host, and then you come down to earth, and it's the Israelite nation worldwide ministries. And then the rest of the world is beneath us. A lot of people can't see that. But again, I give thanks to our elder because he has not taught us that. He taught us the scriptures, which
Yeah.
reveal that.
Yes,
There is
absolutely.
a difference.
And then that's a really big point. He doesn't go into books and, okay, well, read this and read. No, it's like the information is out there.
Yeah.
But the one good thing about being at the Israelite Nation is that you have the opportunity to go out there. No one's going to say, oh, you shouldn't be reading that. You're only supposed to be reading the Bible. No. We understand that, the world is bigger than that, and we are living real life.
And I like it when we have an opportunity to see and to read and to view things that may not even be accurate, because it shows you the nature of the people who went to great length. That lady, what's her name? Viola, whatever her name is probably making $10 million on just for shooting this movie. And that's just the first payment. My point is, it's a reflection of the producers. It's a reflection of the corporate people behind the producers. They have no understanding of the history and culture of the Israelite nation. And that's the key. But they get to make the movie. Go figure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we just missed a comment, and I that was a really good one. Anyways, but hopefully it will come back around.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide, which is, let's see, is it that one? I think there's one before that one.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so I call this blood money. And the reason why, this is just pointing out some of the, and we're just, like I said, it's just using it as a guide to get us to where we need to get to. Now, the Woman King is a fabrication of history, as we mentioned before. And the Kingdom of Dahomey was the main player, believe it or not, was a main player in the slave trade.
Exactly.
So yeah, they were, according to history, they were a main player. And I did try to look at it from different perspective. Was it being written that way to make them look bad? But I'll show you other things which kind of made me believe that no, they were a main player in history. Okay. They enslaved Black people and sold them to the Europeans. And if anyone understands that, how a lot of the tribes back in the days, I don't know about now, but back in the days, how they used to work, a lot of them used to fight each other. And what they would do, they would get the captives that from the fight that they had from the other tribes, and they would either have them as their own slaves, and those slaves will be assimilated into their society, or during the time of the slave trade, they used that as an opportunity to sell them to the Portuguese or the Dutch or the British, right, or whoever came looking for resources. And for the most part, these people, they did and they didn't, but they came looking for resources, and this is what was presented to them. But it got to the point whereby it was no longer, oh, here are some slaves that we have, that we captured, and we want to exchange them for goods. It got to the point whereby they started to make it a business by deliberately going out to different tribes and fighting with them and getting their captives so that they can do the trade with the Europeans for guns, for alcohol, for beads.
Also, Charmaine, it's important to mention that the women were not the one selling these guys. They were part of the military, whereby they were able to, capture the individuals, and then they gave them to their king, who went through the process of making the sale. A lot of the women initially, I should say, the women were there as, what should we say, an exaggeration to the army, because the army they weren't big enough. So they wanted to display to the enemy that, yeah, we have a big army. So they made the women be as part as the display. Then eventually they
Mm.
became part of the army.
Yes, and also they had lost a lot of their males through other battles as
That's
well, through other battles. So, and also just to add to your point as well, a lot of the women in this particular army were from other tribes as well.
yeah.
So as slaves, they had really had no choice. They had to join the army. And in one resource that I read, it said that technically speaking, the women in the harem and the the warriors, they were all considered the king's wives. So he had a choice whether he wanted them to be here or there. So,
Wow.
and that was one of the reasons why they weren't allowed to take husbands.
So
And
so then it makes sense to be in the army so that you could have a king as your husband.
well, I don't think it was their choice. So, it wasn't really their choice. But I
Okay.
mean, some actually did go because that's what they wanted to do, join the army.
Yeah.
But one thing that people don't understand, a lot of these women as well were from other tribes and they were assimilated into the army.
I'm just thinking, you mentioned another queen earlier that was very powerful. There was another lady in Northern Africa. I think her name was Kahina. And
Mm.
you remember she defeated the Mohammedans several times,
Yes.
and she stood out. And a very, maybe one day we'll talk about her as well.
You see it, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, we can go way back, biblically, but
And
we're
she
looking at.
she was an Israelite.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But like I said, we can go way back and look at people like Deborah. I mean, my goodness,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, a warrior.
That's right.
And, she was a warrior. She was a judge of Israel.
Hmm.
And it was, who was it? Was it Balak? He was afraid. He
Yeah,
didn't want to
Balak,
go and
yeah.
battle. Yeah, he didn't want to go and battle by himself. He's like, well, I'm not going if you're not going. You better go. So it's like, what is that?
Yeah.
And she led them, and she was a warrior. She was like a queen. She was a queen
But
unto them.
here's the point that people don't understand. Back in the day, battles, wars had a component, a spiritual component as well. It wasn't just you take a gun and you go out to shoot
Mm,
people, because part of our forefathers used to send the singers out first. So how is it that the other side has got their guns pointing at you, but you send the singers out? And you know why? Because once they started to sing, who knows what happened? But then the other guys ran, and of course, I don't want to call any names of singers
mhm.
that today, but the point is that once that singing was that music was received, who knows who showed, spiritually speaking, and who knows what they did, and that's why the others were running.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, guys, we're talking about the Dahomey connection. It is a very popular subject right now because it's based on the Woman King, the movie that's out right now. So please, help this video get its traction that it needs by liking it, by sharing, by subscribing if you haven't subscribed already, and let's have a fruitful discussion. Thank you so much. Okay.
All right.
So, okay.
Now,
Let's
no,
move.
I want to mention another woman too, and this is the one in Arabia. She was not a warrior, but she started. Well, let me say it this way. Her name was Khadijah, and
Mm,
she was an entrepreneur. She resided in Arabia at the time, at a place called
mm,
Khaybar, and Yathrib, Medina, whatever. But
mm,
anyway, this was after Solomon had passed, about 930 BC, and she did from tremendous things as far as productivity and prosperity was concerned, to the point where she had to hire this guy by the name of Muhammad to be one of her employees.
mm,
She eventually fell in love with him, and they got married. And he obviously, he learned a few things about Israel. He learned how to call on the God of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, you know the rest of the story. He had an experience in the cave, and it wasn't a good experience. But anyway, shortly thereafter, she passed away, and he inherited all her wealth. And from that wealth came the Mohammedan, the entire Islamic, the foundation thereof business. So
Yeah.
she shouldn't be, and the reason I mention that is not the physical battle in the way that we think about it, but it's a spiritual battle. And that
Yes.
is important to understand, because as you continue with the presentation, we will see that, as I said earlier, three types of people came together to
Mm.
make slavery a possibility or a reality. And this is important to know, that we had a hand in the foundation of all three, or the strengthening of all three of these type of peoples.
It's funny you even mentioned this, because a lot of people don't see, they don't see that element, that it was a woman that actually influenced the the whole Islamic world per se.
Exactly.
Even though her teachings was probably distorted, at the end of the day, it was her influence, and she was an Israelite woman, not just
Yes.
any woman. She was an Israelite woman, and that's happened many times. And another thing, even just going off what you're saying, throughout the scriptures, you read the book of Kings and Chronicle, even the book of Samuel's, and you read about
Judges.
the mothers of the kings, which were the good kings and which were the bad kings. You can
Yes.
tell,
Yes.
how their mother brought them up,
Yes.
So the
And, and,
mothers were very influential.
and here's the reason that I mentioned it, because I know we're dealing with Dahomey, but I wanted to show the impact of a woman on
Mm.
their children, and that we look to the women in this nation as well for that type of guidance, and as far as raising their children is concerned, because so much, I mean, as we know, a man, we can't have the children, we contribute, but you carry the children and you give birth to them. It's very important. If people understood that, they would understand Jesus. They would
See,
understand the concept behind Jesus, you see, and then they would see the difference between Jesus and the Christ. You see, one from below, the other from above. These are
mm-hmm.
things that are important, but the war is still ongoing. It's not a physical war all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
one that needs to be made. I don't want to detract from the movie, but I want to put things in perspective.
No, it's a very good point, and thank you for saying that. Thank you for having the courage to say that. A lot of people would not like you because you said those things. You said such nice things about women, and about strong women too.
Yes, it
Um,
is true though.
it takes a strong man to know the
But
strength of the woman.
and I tell you, I not only do I recognize the woman for what she has done or what she is doing, as far as this nation is concerned, I recognize the creation of our Father in creating the woman for the man. You see,
Mm-hmm.
and this is significant that we get to that foundation, because anything that is contrary to the natural order of creation is demonic. And we need to
Yes,
make that
absolutely.
point very, very clear.
Yeah.
So, as far as woman king, it never happened. You had a strong woman who did some heroic deeds, and she needs to be recognized, but she was never a king. She could
Yeah.
only be a queen, and that's good.
And that's the beauty. It is beautiful to be a woman. It is great to be a woman.
Yes, yes, yes,
Embrace it, because there's nothing like it. It's, you know,
yes.
by embracing it, you become the true essence of a woman. By fighting it, who knows what you're going to become? You'll never be confident. You'll never have the self-esteem that you need, because you're trying to be something that you're not. Right?
I
Be a woman.
agree.
If you're a woman, if you are a woman, be one, and be proud of
Exactly.
it. Absolutely.
A lot of my
Absolutely,
friends,
my
I'm not ashamed to say this. A lot of my friends are under 12 years old, and I see the impact of a woman and the wisdom that they have. I said wisdom because they tell me things that I'm like, how the heck did you know that? So therein is the upbringing that I'm talking about. Therein is the teaching them according to the concepts and the precepts of the scriptures, which is only something. And of course, all my friends are Israelites.
Yes.
So it says a lot about the woman, indeed.
Yeah. Absolutely. You don't have to be a king in order to be great. Women
No,
were queens, were princesses. We came from the loins of kings and queens. And judges.
yes,
Let's be happy about that.
Felicia mentioned Queen Esther. That's a very good point. Again, therein lies the wisdom
A
of
very wise woman, extremely
yes.
wise woman. You know,
She
there is
saved
so
the
many.
entire Israelite nation. That one woman did. Now
Yeah,
that's a battle worth talking about. How come they didn't put a video or a movie about Queen Esther?
exactly. And there was Shira. Did she not build cities?
Yes.
Shira built cities. Could you imagine? Wow.
So I want people to really get the real spiritual essence of what we're saying here. It
Yeah.
is not just about everything that is you see on television. There is a depth to it, and we have to sometimes remove some of the the humus that is there to get to that. And we're giving you insight on how to be critical in a constructive way. That's the key.
Okay. All right, let's get to the next slide. Okay. Oh no, let's go back one. Let's go back one. Just a few points that the movie was also centered around the king. His name was Gizo. And this is a very interesting king because he was actually known as the slave king in history. So that was his, this is what he was known as, which is really quite ironic because they were turning, in the movie, it's like he's like the savior, but he was actually a slave king. And we're going to prove that just in
Yes.
the next slide. And as I said before, the kings had hundreds of wives. And one thing that's not mentioned is that the wives were forcibly circumcised. I think we don't even, yeah, exactly. Mutilated, in other words. Anyways,
That
and
hurts.
yeah, and usually when the king dies, hundreds of the women in particular, were also murdered. So along with him.
Yeah.
So this is glorifying the kingdom of Dahomey. Anyways, I just thought these points need to be mentioned. Whatever your thoughts are, they're your thoughts. Actually share them with us. We would like to know.
Yes.
And one of the annual customs was the execution of 500 plus prisoners. And this was a sacrifice to their ancestors. So it just reminds me of the whole, what is that tribe? Oh, it
Ashanti?
will come to me. No, it will come to me. The one in South America, Central
Oh,
America,
Amazon.
not the Amazons. Anyways, it will come to me.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, they did tons of human sacrifices. So this was all part of them and their greatness, apparently.
I think though to put that in perspective, I think one of the research I did indicated that those men were sacrificed, but they were engaged in some criminal activity previously. So instead of putting them in jail or killing them at the point of their being indicted or what have you, they just saved them on for that special event.
It
You
was
understand?
mainly slaves that
Yeah,
they sacrificed. So
more slaves. Some of them
yeah,
were criminals also.
yeah, but not the Aztecs. But keep adding the names. If
Okay.
that's the Mayans, is it the Mayans? Yes, the Mayans.
Nice.
Yeah, they used to do huge human. Actually, a lot of cultures back in the days used to do huge human sacrifices. And the funny thing is, our God said He is not the God. He does not delight in human sacrifice. This is not what He's about, and that's why He separated us from all the nations. This is not what He's into. So
And that was a European thing as well. The barbarians did a lot of, and they ate the
like
flesh.
every nation,
Yeah,
every single nation did that.
yeah,
Every single nation. And
yeah.
that's why the God of Israel pulled us out and away from that. But when you read Deuteronomy 28, it's actually very sad, the state that we were said to fall to by not obeying the law, statutes, and commandments.
Yes.
Okay, let's get the next slide. And this is I don't know if any of you know this young lady. Her name is Sarah Forbes Bonita, and she is known as I guess she was a ward to Queen Victoria. She was known as her goddaughter. And apparently, when she was 5 years old, about 5 years old, her mother and her father was killed during one of these tribal wars.
Excuse me, why they're
Yes.
using Queen Victoria and not King Victoria?
Good point, Elder Michael. Why? Anyways, so yeah, so apparently, so she was kidnapped, or she was taken from her tribe, and I think her tribe was part of the Igbo tribe,
Okay.
or Niger. Well, she was Nigerian, or part of the Nigerian tribe, or the Yoruba. I think actually Yoruba. Sorry, the Yoruba people in West Africa, and she was taken as a little child, 5 years old, as a slave. She was a slave to King Gizo. So the thing was, he had her as a slave, and then he gave her to one of the men that came on behalf of Queen Victoria, and she actually took his name, which is Forbes, and then she was given to Queen Victoria as a gift. But she was a slave herself, but she was also royalty. So, and this is the same king. This is the same king that didn't like slavery, but this is what he used to do. So, yeah, this is the
Yeah,
king.
I think, remember, King Solomon had a similar situation where he was presented with many wives as a part of a business deal to
Mhm.
close the deal. The whole idea, from an entrepreneurial point of view, it meant that now there's a family merging. It's not just business and dollars and cents, but also the wife or the daughter, usually presented to the other partner, to seal that deal so that they become one and they operate
Mhm.
in the interests of both of them. So that is
Right.
something that was,
So that's why she was probably given as a gift.
yes,
Right.
ancient custom.
Mm. Yes. When you go on to read around the story, you would also read about King Gizo as well, and some of the things that he got up to. And apparently, he was very angry that the slave trade was over, because this is how they were making their money, or
Yes.
making their wealth, with the trading with the Europeans. And even after it was abolished, he continued, the trade
Hmm.
legally. So yeah, it was easy money for them, easy. It was easier than growing palm oil, apparently. So
Yeah, but again, I don't blame them. I blame us, because had we been obedient to our God, we will not be the slaves. We could have probably be the slave owners. I don't know. I'm just saying. The point I'm making is we were disrespectful to our God. We were disobedient to him, and he kicked us out the house. So we ended up in Western Africa, like I said before, where we were traded for goods. And now here we are in the new Egypt, and the things are not looking any better. Only in the Israelite nation, Worldwide Ministries, is there a difference. Because now, a lot of people don't know that there was a slave ship called Jesus. So when you call on Jesus, I don't know if it was Hawkins or the other guy that owned that slave ship, but when you calling on Jesus every Sunday, who are you calling on? The slave ship
the slave ship.
or somebody else?
Yes, I just want to know, did you guys watch the video yesterday, the live yesterday with our elder, and he was talking about the Christ? I
Right.
mean, my goodness, it was an amazing session.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, and if you haven't watched it, please take your time out and go and have a look at it. It
Yes.
really is very, very
Yes.
powerful.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so let's look at the next slide. So we understand that Israel was dispersed. And I think one thing to recognize, Michael, you mentioned the Negro spirituals earlier.
Yes.
Well, it so happened that Israel, a lot of Israelites, doesn't matter from what tribe, and we often use the term Israelites, and a lot of the resources that you would read will probably just say Jews. They'll say Black Jew, or they'll say Jews.
Right.
But we say Israelites. But a lot of the Israelites, they left the land way before the Second Testament.
Right.
So, and that's one indication that they were really the children of Israel, because as you said, they were singing Negro spirituals, but they were specifically speaking about or singing about everything that took place in the First Testament. They were speaking about Daniel, and they were speaking about Ezekiel and the wheel, and they were speaking about Moses, and they were speaking about, you never heard them, sing about Peter and Paul and John. You never heard them sing about that. You never heard them sing about Jesus. And if they did, then you know that they were infiltrated by Christianity.
Exactly.
They were singing about the things that took place in the First Testament.
That is such an important point, Officer Charmaine, because it shows the independence from Christianity of what they were doing. It shows, because that was before they were taught anything by Christians. So they did not know about Jesus per se. They would sing, I forgot the song, but Christianity has taken out some of the words and put Jesus in. And I know that for a fact, and so to make it seem as if, okay, this was from the beginning, but that's not the way it was. Christianity came 200 years later after they were singing the Negro spirituals.
Yeah. And so this is that's a really powerful point. And it also plays into the Israelite dispersal, because if we look at the biblical history, as I said before, you look at the book of Judges, you will see how many times that the children of Israel were dispersed, were taken into captivity, were enslaved. It was 10 years here, 70 years there, 5 years. It was crazy, because we were so stubborn, so hard-headed, that this is what we went through. And slavery is the natural punishment for us.
Yes.
So some of the key times was during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. You can read the story, when the king of Israel, he fled to Egypt, or tried to flee. This was during the time of Jeremiah, and what Jeremiah was prophesying. It's like, you know what? God of Israel says, you're going to go into Babylon. You're going to go into captivity. Let it be. It's okay. But no, they're like, I'm not going to go. No, I'm not going to be captive. And they ran off. And a lot of them did leave Israel at that time. And again, they left Israel in 70 CE, and again in 130 CE. And as we know, they went everywhere after the Spanish Inquisition. It was just pandemonium. It was mayhem, because they were trying to escape, the different areas in Europe, especially in Spain and Portugal, where a lot of them reside. So
definitely. And they had an impact on the local culture wherever they went. We talked about Arabia. You can see there, and the impact they had on Islam. Further south, they had Yemen. They actually developed that area as well. And then they came into, and like I said before, Ghana was one of the major contributions that we built. And then also you can see them coming from Europe here, because all that is part and parcel of the dispersal. A lot of them were dispersed at the time of the Romans and became part of the Roman Empire. And then, of course, they got kicked out, and so on and so forth. And the rest of it is history. But it's important to recognize this, the impact that we've had everywhere we went. We were the only people that could read and write effectively. And wherever we went, we distributed that ability. We taught others about our God, and so on and so forth. And they couldn't comprehend what we did, because the other side was also doing something similar. And this is what we get today, even in the movie that we are talking about right now.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to just go through this very quickly. And one of the reasons why this is here is that it was produced in 1670 by an author, a gentleman by the name of John Oldby. And you can do the research, but this is back in 1670, and this is what it says. Many Jews also are scattered over this region. And he's talking about the region of the Niger Delta, around this area. It says, many Jews are scattered over this region, some native boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the Niger. Others are Asian strangers who fled thither either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian or from Judea, wasted and depopulated years, Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians, or else such as come out of Europe, whence they were banished out of some part of Italy in the year 1342, out of Spain in the year 1462, out of the Lower Countries in 1350, out of France in 1403, out of England in 1422. These all differ in, what's that? Habits, and are divided into several tribes having no domination through both wealth and numerous, but despised of all nations. Look, they're despised of all nations, and so abominated by the Turks, that they are not admitted to be Mohammedans, unless first baptized, and no otherwise made use of them to receive their customs and gather their taxes. So it's telling you this gentleman, and he's written quite extensively on the Jews of Spain and Portugal, especially of the Jews of Spain and Portugal, and he identifies them by the way they look and their customs and their practices, and he's following them, and he's telling you that they are all in the region of West Africa where the slavery took place.
Right. Now, here's another point. Ancient Egyptians were identified with the River Nile, and the Europeans are identified even today by the Caucasus Mountains. But the Israelite diaspora was identified by the Niger, the river. And notice there's only one G there. And if you read Acts 13, verse 1, you will see that Niger is also related to Simeon, I think, back in the day. So the Niger River in Western Africa was, as you were saying, Officer Charmaine, the home, the base to a lot of the Israelites that were dispersed from Jerusalem. And of course, having the river is important because cleanliness is important. We not only use the river for agriculture, we use it to bathe and, before we go to worship the God of Israel and all these things. So that is a very important point, the word Niger. But that word turned out to be misused. And today the Europeans, they added an extra G. What is most disgusting is a lot of the rap music and the hip hop, they continue what the Europeans have started. Some people might say today it's just a movie. It's not historical, but movies have impact. Today, the word Niger is misused, and all our teenagers are using that same misuse. They're applying that same European concept to the word, not understanding that out of ignorance they did that, and not understanding that our forefathers were referred to as Niger.
Right, and it was an identification of where you came from.
Yes.
So it made sense. Okay, so these guys are, as opposed to maybe South Africa or East Africa.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, these guys are from the Niger, the Niger region.
Yes.
Whether it be mainly the south of the Niger region, which is exactly where we were from. But
Yes.
it became such a derogatory term that, like, don't call me that. Don't call me that. It's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really quite interesting because, as you said, the word is actually, I said Niger, didn't I? But it's Niger, right?
Well,
Niger.
the French is slightly different.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, Niger, not Niger, not the English Niger.
Yeah.
It's Niger.
Niger, soft G. Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's go to the next one. So we're building this story. I hope we have enough time to do this, but we're building the story. You saw Dahomey and you saw Wider. Now you're looking at where did we come from? You just saw where where all the different places we came from, especially Spain and Portugal. And that was done through the Inquisition. And there was a video that we done, I think it was back in January or so. And we spoke about especially a lot of these old references, what happened in the time of Spain and Portugal, and how the children of Israel, the Israelites there in Portugal especially, were deported from Portugal into Saint Tome, into was it Guinea, the region of Guinea, and into Angola. And Guinea again is an area that refers to the west coast of Africa. It refers to that area. It wasn't just the country Guinea, it was referring to that region of Africa. Right. So this is where all the slaves were taken. They were taken to these Portuguese settlements, right, and deposited there. But before they were taken there, first of all, it's important to know that it was mainly the children. It was mainly the children that were taken away from their parents and taken to these locations. And while they were there, they were converted to Christianity. So remember, you've got children in these regions and they converted, or they have converted to Christianity. So if you've taken away the elders and the mothers and the fathers, and you're giving them this new way of life, or this new philosophy, what do you think is going to happen? Of course, it plays into the bigger plan. But yes, they ended up serving other gods. You know, they ended up serving gods of wood and stone. It was all taken away from them. Yeah. And in Deuteronomy 28, it speaks about the children being taken. You shall have your children and they'll be taken from you. So it started from the time of Portugal. And it even speaks about the women, you know, running after their children, you know, when they were taken into the boats and literally drowning. And then when it happened the second time around, some of the women, there's like, you're not taking my children at all. And what did they do with their children? It was terrible. But then you read it in Deuteronomy, that's exactly what they did. You know, they killed their own children because they didn't want them taken away.
To your point, Officer Charmaine, just because the woman is not in a military outfit, she's not wearing a military uniform, doesn't mean that the war is not ongoing. She is continuing the fight. Now the war has taken a higher level. It's a spiritual battle now for the mind of the child, you know. So we have to be aware of these things, that the children are still under the influence of the enemy, and they're still being, what should we say, programmed. I like to say it's a social whitewashing. All of these things are ongoing today, even from, you know, a small grade 5, I guess, or even below that, where they start programming them with ideas and concepts. They're not teaching from the Bible anymore. When I was a boy, yeah, we used to teach from the Bible, learn in school. That doesn't happen anymore. So we have to be careful. We have to be aware that the battle is still ongoing. And the woman, just because you can't be king, you still have to fight. You still have to fight. The men obviously have to do their best as well, and to make sure that the women, the children are well prepared, not necessarily to be disrespectful to anybody, but to be critical in the way they think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to the next slide. Not the next one, the one following.
Yes, the next slide, please.
Moderator, yeah, next slide. Not this one, the next one. That's the one. Okay. I just wanted to point out in this particular slide, it says here that the east of Great Popo begins Dahomey territory, guarded by the important town of Glenwich, which is known to Europeans by the various names of, this is where I want to get to. So this area is known by various names of Fida, Herda, Wida, Wida. The old writers call it Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews, while the neighboring river Allah, whose real name is Ephra, became Euphrates. So again, you see the play on the name itself. And when you read the resources, it actually says that the Portuguese gave that particular city the name the Kingdom of Wida because of the Jews that were there, that they had put there. Remember, they took them to that location. And also note that they are the ones that are building these map references. So it's almost, what it reminds me of is when, when Jesus Christ, he's on the cross, and they put on their King of the Jews, right? They're playing. It's also almost like mockery. It's like, oh yeah, well, look, here's your king. Look at your king, right? So they put their King of the Jews. So the same thing the Portuguese did. It's like, oh, this is your kingdom, Jews. This is the kingdom of Judah. So they took them there, they put them there, and this is what they called that location, which I just thought was really quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I needed to share this because it's not a modern reference. It's a reference from, when was this one? I think this one was from, 1850.
Yeah.
So,
Let's look at some of the comments. Maybe we can address some of them.
Yes, please. Let's do that.
And it says, this is from Knight Grant, Jay. I agree with Officer Charmaine. It's an excellent idea to watch the movie and draw your own conclusions to pick sense out of nonsense. When we know our history, it's easier. It's easier to see than the fake news. I agree, because at the end of the day, the decision is ours, regardless of what is being said. And sometimes things are deliberately said in a way to distort the truth. We have to be very, very critical of these things. We have to use the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, as our foundation. Then there's Donna says, I saw it twice. Oh, she saw the movie twice. Very good.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It is what is it? Depiction of some events. I like Hollywood fluff, like most Hollywood fluff. Okay, she said, pick up the book for historical facts. It was entertainment. That is good, because you have to be able to make the distinction between the facts and entertainment. And Hollywood is always going to paint a picture just to sell, to make money.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. So we have to be aware of that. That's why we have to understand what the Bible says.
Okay.
Fields says, if it wasn't for the Israelite nation, there would be no flavor, substance, or salt in the earth. Thanks for and to Elder Shadrach for bringing us back. It's a very good point. Had it not been for Elder Shadrach, I'd be a total waste. And, because like I've always said, and I'll say it again, it's not master's wit that was the most painful. It was ignorance of self, not knowing who you are, not knowing your history, not knowing your culture. That is very painful, because, people can talk about, we had property in our family for 2,000 years. I'm like, what? Yeah. 2,000 years?
Yeah.
We can't even speak to 24 hours. But anyway.
Exactly.
Veronica says, yes, yesterday YouTube with Elder Shadrach was awesome. Excellent. I agree with that. Yes. Pansy, great point, connecting the dots of how the parents were removed from the equation so that they could indoctrinate the children. Definitely.
That was a powerful move. Absolutely.
Yeah. But we're not blaming them for their indoctrination. Remember that. They are doing their job because they are serving their God. They have to tell the story and distort the picture. We, as the ones that should be telling the story, we have to make sure that we get what is truth and what is the lie, and separate the two.
But it's actually a very powerful point, because it plays on the word children of Israel.
Yes.
The children were removed from their parents. And as I said in Deuteronomy, it says that your children, you will have your children and you will not enjoy them because they have been removed from you. And this was taking place in Portugal before we even got to the Americas. So you imagine, There is no parent there. There's nobody to tell you, you've got to keep the laws, the statutes and commandments. There's nobody to say, today is the Sabbath day. Did you say your prayers today? There's nobody to say, look, it's the new moon. Let's have a feast to our God. There's nobody to say these things. There's nobody to remind us that, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, he wants us to keep his feast, to keep the Passover, to keep the Day of Atonement, to keep, all the ordinances. There's nobody there to say that, because you got children, and you got children teaching children. And I remember I was watching a documentary, and it was really quite a good one. It was a YouTube. And the one of the guy, he was saying, no, this cannot be Israelites in the kingdom of Wider, because these guys were worshiping snakes. Wider is known as a snake worshiping place. Well, you have children in that vicinity. And why were we always punished? We were always punished because we weren't serving other gods, regardless of whether it was children or not. The fact is, we always served other gods, and we never got it right. If we got it right, we would not be in this situation today.
Exactly.
So you can't say, well, we were always doing what we were supposed to do. No. Listen, the God of Israel, he gave Jeroboam Israel. He gave him 10 tribes. He says, I am going to give you 10 tribes. And this is right after Solomon. Literally a few days later, then Jeroboam received the 10 tribes. And Rehoboam, which was Solomon's son, received Judah and Jerusalem. And what happened? Jeroboam, he got to a point where he started to become so schizophrenic. He started to say, oh, well, you know what? I have to build an altar here, because if not, everybody's going to go back to Jerusalem and start worshiping. And so what does he do? He doesn't just build an altar for the God of Israel. He builds calves. He builds calves and had the children worshiping the calves. And what did he say? These are your gods, Israel. Just how it was back in the time when they came out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Well, that is crazy. This is hundreds of years later, and you've gone back to that terrible time.
Yeah. And I think
in the land just a few days after King Solomon. Anyway,
if I'm not mistaken, he lived in Egypt extensively. So maybe that was the culture he was.
But he was given. Somebody said, "Hey, listen, don't worry about it. You're going to receive the 10, not even 1 or 2 or 5 or half. No, you're going to receive 10 tribes of Israel. So you become king over these 10 tribes." And instead of God of Israel, what should I do? Or what can I do to help? How can help me lead your people? He's gone around and said, you know what? These guys are going to run back to Jerusalem. Let's build them gods so that they can stay here. And if he can do that just a few days after King Solomon's, passes, how much more with these that were separated from their parents when they were children, up to the age of about 25. These are children teaching children.
And where are we today? We're in the same situation. We're bowing down. And when I say we, I'm talking about the Jacobites. They're bowing down before the cross, which is, the symbol of the snake. It's the same thing. They need to. This is why we are trying to say it's not so much about the movie. It's about understanding the history and the culture of Israel. Even though the movie producers got it wrong, it's our obligation to get it right, so that we could serve our God in spirit and in truth. Elder Shadrach made that same point yesterday when he talked about all of what the other side is doing is dedicated and directed towards the children. They say it's for the children, because Christmas is for the children, Halloween is for the children, Easter is for the children. You go on and on and on, right?
Of course.
It's all about the snake.
It is. And it's a very powerful and a very clever move. And that's what they continue to do. Yeah. Oh, forget you, because you're stubborn. Let's get the children. And now we live in an age where you can't discipline your children too much, because if it's considered too much,
You go to
then
jail.
you're a bad parent, and yeah, your children will get taken away.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. Did you shout at your children? That's emotional abuse. It's like, oh my goodness. It's like, dare I? You know? It's like, what
So
is happening?
I think the conclusion then we could come to is yes, we made some serious mistakes. We've done some terrible things, and we deserve the punishment that we got. But the one good thing, and I think this point was made earlier also, the God of Israel did not sever his relationship with us. He did not say, you know what, you're bad, I'm out of here. No. And I do apologize to the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob on behalf of all our viewers, because we have done some, like I said, some terrible things. And the God of Israel is not deserving, because he has done amazing um, creation, just for not only for us, but for the entire world. But it's just that we are the only ones that can appreciate some of what he has done. And I thank him for maintaining the covenant and keeping it strong. We broke the covenant, he did not. And thereby we have a chance to return, to come home to our Father's house once again, and to say to our dad, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I did wrong. Could you please forgive me, so that we could be reunited? And for those of you who didn't keep the Day of Atonement, who doesn't know, this is what we have done. And then we celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles, the unification with our God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This is how now we get back to his house. There's only one gate, and that gate leads to the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries. One gate where the truth is taught. Again, we are not hiding the terrible things that we've done. I tell you, Officer Charmaine has made it clear, we were disgusting as a people, but our Father has forgiven us because we admitted our faults and we have returned to him. And we are here today to ask you to do the same, if you haven't already done that. Officer Charmaine. Yeah.
I just, I did have one other slide, but I'm going to skip that one. And no, because you said conclude.
Yeah.
I'm going to, because you said that, and I think it was really very heartfelt, very touching, and it's spot on. Just want to go to slide number 16, which is the last one we'll look at today. And it says here, and I'm going to read it because there's so many. I was just spoiled for choice, but you know what? Let's just to put a bow on what you just said. It says here, Isaiah 54, for a small moment have I forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. In a little wrath I hid my face from thee for a moment, but with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee, Israel. Saith the Lord thy Redeemer. For this is as the waters of Noah unto me. For as I have sworn that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth, so have I sworn that I would not be wroth with thee, nor rebuke thee. For the mountains shall depart, and the hills be removed, but my kindness shall not depart from thee, neither shall the covenant of my peace be removed, saith the Lord that has mercy on thee.
Amen.
Selah and Selah. Amen. This is for Israel. Once again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. It's so important that you do. Remember to like this video and to share it and to subscribe. I want to say a deep, heartfelt thank you to our elder, especially for the lesson yesterday, and even for allowing us to do what we do and find so much passion and enjoyment in teaching others to hopefully serve the God of Israel as well. And thank you to our elder Andor and to all our brethren that are listening all around the world. Thank you so much.
Yes, peace.